Yeah, it's OTB AM on this Friday morning, just gone 8 o'clock. A very good morning to you. I hope it's good wherever you are and hope that you're well. Owen, how are you getting on?
Very well. How are you?
Just listening to the OTB Mount Rushmore promo there and the contention that tends to arise over these things. I want to get heated at times. The loud one was pretty heated during the week with Dan and Ronan. We've Tipperary coming up, of course, later on. My main thought, to be honest with you, listening to that was, thank Christ Westmeath is done, because I can sit back now and relax and just watch all these other ones flow in. I'm just delighted that my county is out of the way.
You could say it was the one with the least contention so far, Westmeath. Is that down to you being extremely persuasive? Like Conor Moore had the opportunity to change something on your Mount Rushmore, and he didn't change a single head. So is that down to...
I was expecting a bit more. It could have got... Look, you're right. And I think that actually it's a great... The Westmeath episode of Mount Rushmore is a great lesson for every other county and for every other human being in the country and beyond in how to do your business. That, don't need to get into a great, debates online, sort of, airing your laundry in public on, I think is the expression that's used here. There was just a lot of bon me, and ultimately we came to the right decision.
What's the slang name for Westmeath as a county? The low-lying fields or whatever it's called. Like, you can change it to the fuss-free county now at this point, because you managed to kind of prance on in here and actually chisel those foreheads out with no fuss whatsoever.
No fuss, that's just the way Westmeath go about their business. It's the Lake County, come on.
Oh yes, of course. That's
but anyway, yeah, you're probably right. It was probably the least contentious. Conor, definitely. I was almost expecting a bit more rancour towards the end, but I think that... it's a difficult position to be in, actually, I have to say, at the end there, where you've put your 4 on the line and the other person has the opportunity to take one of those off, and you're kind of thinking, well, you're of the view, and it was the same in the Louth one, you're of the view, you've come to that 4, that actually, you're of the view, obviously, having put a lot of thought into it, that they're the 4 that should be up there. And it's actually difficult really to arrive at a decision afterwards where somebody is saying, well, you're kind of going to take this one off. But yeah, I think we came to the right decision. I mean, are you insinuating that Westmeath has such a little pick to choose from that there was really no bone of contention? Is that what you're offering forward here?
No, I'd never suggest such a thing like that. I was just getting into the mind of the most, as I said, the most fuss-free county. And how did you do it? Is my question.
Yeah. Well, look, it was a thoroughly enjoyable process. I don't know how much contention we're going to have later on for Tipperary, because they, obviously a very heavy GAA county, and there are so many names that trip off the tongue in relation to that. Nicky English and Owen Kelly are obviously 2 that will be, I presume, primary in the conversation with the 2 lads. Dennis Leamy is in there. Quinny himself might be in there. I mean, he's a difficult position now, because it's got the John Giles about it here, where he can't really be seen to be chiselling his own face into the bleeding mountain.
Well, this is the tricky situation we're in later on this morning, because both Quinlan and Quinlivan both go down as 2 of the greatest Tipperary sports people in their given sport. Now, Quinlivan, obviously, he might say that he's still got a bit of a part to play, perhaps in future years, for Tipperary football, and I think the trend so far has been that current players haven't had a huge amount of success in these sort of things.
It's a cop-out, obviously, but go on.
It is a cop-out completely, but there is a theory out there that he is Tipperary's greatest ever footballer. Alan Quinlan, on the other hand, is he Tipperary's greatest ever rugby player? You could definitely make a case for that, and by that definition, then he has to be in contention. So he's in a very tricky. I don't envy Alan Quinlan. I think a lot of people have had tough calls to make down through the weeks already here, like Colin Buhig in Cork, for example. But I think it doesn't come tougher for somebody than Alan Quinlan this morning, because what do you do? Well, it's a lose-lose situation. Either you come across as somebody who's going to chisel your own head into the mountain, or you're going to be left out looking up at the 4 heads, thinking to yourself, well, that could have been me.
I think you just go for it. Would be my view. I think if you feel that you should be up there, you go for it, because whoever's chosen the various Mount Rushmores are really only going to be a footnote in this entire thing. It's, the legacy is the granite or whatever it is they're going to be chiseled into. That's the legacy. It's not about who chose them. So I think, forget about the short-term backlash you're going to get. If you feel you should be up there, up you go. Up you pop.
I will say Tipperary is a Paul Rouse dream. Possibly the best historical county out there. We've had a couple of situations here where a county may pop up with 1, maybe 2 worldwide top-class athletes from, say, the 20th or from the 19th century or from the 1910s, 1920s, who may have, I don't know, who may have represented Britain in the Olympics and have done well. Tipperary, by my count, have 3 top-class stars if you go way back. They've got the only ever Irish female champion at Wimbledon in Lena Rice. They've got Bob Tisdall. There's a podcast up there for anybody who wants to listen to Paul Rouse on the show with us, I think in 2016. Yeah, it would have been around Rio. So 2016, he gives us the story of Bob Tisdall. Absolutely incredible. Part of what is known as Ireland's greatest ever hour on the track and field stage, when himself and Pat O'Callaghan took home a rake of gold medals all within an hour of each other, I think. And then you've got as well Tom Kiley as well, who's, if you go back through, I think it was the all-around, the event used to be known as, some bizarre version of the decathlon back in the early part of the 20th century, where he would have won, obviously flying under the Union Jack at that point, but still a tip man.
Yeah, that's incredible, like a Wimbledon champion. I mean, and I think some of the Mount Rushmores have been sort of devoured by recency bias, so I hope that, because like some of those achievements that you've mentioned there are will be second to none, you know, and there are other people, the likes of Charlie Swan, obviously be in the mix as well, you assume, and it's always difficult to know. We're back to that when you're into the racing world, is it the jockey, the trainer, the owner, the horse who actually takes responsibility? And to be fair, he was associated with Istabrac for a lot of years, so you know, some would say that I could have been on Istabrac and we would have got the job done as a partnership.
Yeah, let's revisit that theory sometime for sure. Like the one thing that has been indisputable, actually no, it has been very much disputed, I should say, is the importance of moments when it comes to these lists. So, for example, it's been greatness that's been chosen, without question. That's why Seamus Darby doesn't make the Offaly Mount Rushmore. It's why Matt Connor eventually did make the Offaly Mount Rushmore. So where does someone like Shane Long lie in a Mount Rushmore discussion, I wonder? Like, obviously has the moment, but also has a hugely accomplished career behind him.
I think it's difficult to have a Tipperary Mount Rushmore without Shane Long. Like, it does come back to the conversation that I know we definitely had in relation to the Westmeath one, that, you know, it's such a popular sport that almost by nature of it, that if you have somebody that has achieved...
Are you talking about the hurling or the football now?
The soccer.
Just clarifying, because of course he would have been a fond place in the hearts of many Tip hurling fans.
And you could wander down your Steve Staunton route with that, and sort of, when you're looking to make yourself feel better about the decision, say, well, listen, you know, he had a bit of a GAA career as well, but listen, he wasn't going up on Rushmore on that basis. It's a nice little extra caveat. But I do think that, like, given the... it's not really a time for criticising Shane Long's career and what he might have achieved, would be my view. I think that it's a time for reflecting on... you know, the amazing things he did, the number of caps that he amassed, as you say, the moments that he's had in an Ireland shirt, and like, that's the stuff. That's the rationale. And difficult, I think, as I said, I think that if you've achieved something in a sport like football that's so prevalent worldwide, then actually it probably tips you ahead already of some of the other contenders. Without
question, yeah, I think he's possibly going to be one of the first heads up there as well. But like, there's just so many people at a very similar level as well. It's the hurling conversation which is going to be extremely divisive here, I would have thought.
Yeah. One last one on this before we leave it and we move on to the rest of the show. In relation to the Kerry one, your difficulty, I think, in terms of you will be relying on that cop-out, right? Like, of such and such is still active. But you'll be able to do it quite easily because there's such an array of, like, unbelievable names to pick from outside of that. But is there anybody on the current Kerry scene, football or otherwise, that you'd be thinking will be worthy of inclusion or certainly discussion?
I don't think so, to be honest. Like, yeah, I don't think that, like, you can make the David Clifford case, and like,
it's too early. Yeah,
it's just too soon. It's too soon for a crowd. Like, I mean, there's been 2 All-Ireland medals won in the last, whatever, 12 years at this point. You're going to be going up against people with 4 times that in some cases, and close to 4 times that. So I don't think so. And also as well, I think that I don't think it's a cop-out to say that somebody who's currently playing shouldn't be involved in a Mount Rushmore discussion. I think that actually time is a good thing for these. I think that as time passes by, I think it gives us a full appreciation for how good a player was in particular. I think it is very hard to... I think there's very few people at the moment in football where... Or maybe we've actually just got better at this, that we're actually like appreciate these moments in people's careers while we have them. And I think that there's that case around Stephen Cluxton. I think there's that case around Brian Fenton. I think there's probably a case around it with Clifford at the moment as well, that he was such a breath of fresh air as soon as he landed that everybody was like, we just need to soak this in.
Yeah. I am of the view that it's a total cop-out. Like, my view on the Robbie Henshaw one, for example, right, so he was included in the Westmeath one, is that if he was to suffer a career-ending injury, which in the current climate seems highly unlikely, tomorrow, would he be included in the Mount Rushmore? And the answer is yes.
Well, yeah, okay.
I think that's the logic.
I still think that in down the line, when you get used to watching another midfielder, for example, or somebody who isn't as good as Robbie Henshaw, I'm not saying that's the rationale for getting nostalgic about players who've played in the past, but down the line, I think that there's just a greater appreciation for everything, isn't there? Like, I mean, nostalgia is a powerful thing, and having a bit of time away from actually not watching him week in, week out is a powerful thing as well. And I don't think it is a cop-out, to be honest. I think, like, the Robbie Henshaw situations, because he is legitimately one of Westmeath's greatest ever sports people, Westmeath's greatest ever rugby player, and he's playing right now. That's a fact, and that's what you're dealing with. Whereas I think with, like, you're not comparing like with like if you're looking at Henshaw and David Clifford. Like, David Clifford is in the embryonic stage of his intercounty career.
Absolutely. Like, if David Clifford was playing for Westmeath, would he get on that? Like, he would have been up for discussion, obviously, in a way exactly in a way that he probably won't be in the Kerry one. But no, that's ultimately a fair answer at the end of it all. So look, you've probably getting sweaty palms already just discussing this thing. You've a few weeks to play with Jet. Do you know when your D date is? I know with Meath coming up on Monday that Tommy Rooney has been already sort of putting out doing a bit of fishing for. Have you any set date for the call up?
Yeah, I think it's after the June bank holiday, perhaps actually the day after the June bank holiday, Monday.
Well, that's going to ruin your bank holiday straight off the bat.
Straight off the bat. That's why I need to get cracking on it now, so I can enjoy my bank holiday. Because I know that it's kind of tongue-in-cheek when we're like, oh, the sense of responsibility and all that, but we're not. People at home, this is the one time we're actually not being sarcastic. It is actually a truly big... Really, like, it's going to be the thing that we all get most hate for, because you are representing... There's a sense of representation about it, and it is so easy to completely mess it up.
Yeah, you think like that right up until the 11th hour, and then you're like, oh crap, the weight of responsibility has landed on my shoulders. Do get in contact with us this morning, 087 9180 180 on WhatsApp if you want to drop us a message. And as always on any of our social channels as well. Alan O'Neill has been in contact on YouTube this morning just to simply say morning, lads, and good morning to you, Alan. Hope you're well, wherever it is you're at, and do get your comments into us this morning. We'll bring them to our audience. Right, we're going to give you a bit of a flavour of what's coming up on the show this morning. We're going to get stuck into the sports pages in just a couple of moments' time and let you know what's going on there across the back pages this morning. Fergus McFadden has announced his retirement from rugby, and we're going to speak with him just after 8:30 this morning. So again, any comments for Fergus, get them into us. The OTB Kids takeover is coming your way after that. Simon Zebo in the hot seat this morning. So exactly what it is the kids of Ireland have put to Simon Zebo. Some tricky questions in there. That is just before 9. And after 9, Mickey Quinn is off the couch for you this morning with his latest video. The Mount Rushmore for Tipperary is just after that at about 9:15 this morning, if you're setting your alarm to come back to us at that stage. And the crappy quiz just before 10 o'clock, where myself and Tommy and Nathan will go head to head, and I'm sure another seamless version of the crappy quiz. But right now it's time for the back pages.
OTB AM.
And we're going to kick things off with offtheball.com for you this morning. Lots of great stuff up there. The John Giles 11 that we mentioned a little bit earlier on. A few contentious calls in there, it has to be said as well. So as specific comments as well about the quality of Roy Keane, all up on offtheball.com this morning. Tommy Welch's take on the lockdown. Simon Zebo is asked which is better, Cork or Paris, as part of the OTB Kids takeover. So it doesn't come any trickier than that. That's all up on offtheball.com this morning.
The Irish Independent this morning leads with a photograph from Hanover yesterday as racing got back underway. You've got jockeys wearing visors and protective masks there, resumed behind closed doors in Germany yesterday. The main story, top 4 tournament plan as League of Ireland cling to return hopes, writes Dan McDonnell. A 4-team tournament, including European qualifiers Dundalk, Shamrock Rovers, Derry City and Bohemians, has emerged as a possible experiment for a return to play in the summer, with the logistics of hosting it in the Aviva Stadium being considered. Now, the cost from a health perspective has been highlighted by a quote in excess of 50 grand for a test for every player and official in the Premier and First Divisions. It is unclear, McDonald writes, about whether or not there will be, where those funds would actually come from. So it's a good piece by Dan this morning, and Niall Quinn has said on Wednesday that the FAI is engaged with government health officials to clarify what the details laid out in the government's roadmap for reopening business and society means for soccer, because we've seen it in the last couple of days with the GAA that the roadmap isn't necessarily where the organisations are going to take their orders from, that it doesn't necessarily mean that because you can, by the letter of the law, bring small sessions back by the start or the middle of June, it doesn't mean that it's the right thing to do for every organisation, and the GAA obviously kicking that back till the end of July. And then the other story, which is kind of a theme across the back pages this morning, Paddy Tally has been out saying this could be the shake-up the GAA has needed. And I think it's an opportunity for reflection for pretty much everybody in the world at the moment, and an organisation like the GAA that needs a lot of thought and a lot of reflection to solve the many issues that it has, and the spider web of different interests that exist across the association now could be a vital time for the GAA to have a think about where it wants to be in a year or 2 years' time.
Part of the difficulty is that we could fall into that Brexit territory where the UK government got so obsessed with talking about one issue for the best part of 3 or 4 years before obviously all this stuff kicked off, that you take the eye off the ball of everything else. So we get so focused in trying to decide on a date that ultimately actually the GAA themselves are probably largely not going to really decide on. It's going to come from other quarters, that you don't really take the time to say, you know, I don't know if he's got any specific areas that he feels are worthy of looking at, but, you know, that there is a difficulty that you get sort of distracted by a very worthy conversation, but one that's hard to actually influence outside of direct direction from the government.
Yeah, like, just to clarify what he wants to see the training to games ratio for club and county players improve greatly, and he says that there's no need for an inter-county season to be any longer than 4 or 5 months for most, basically in line with the NFL in America, with games week on week. And Tally says many of those involved in games won't just jump straight back into the rat race if and when restrictions ease completely. So a lot of food for thought, he says. People will be thinking about how much time is required to run off an inter-county season and how much time is required to run off a club season as well.
Yeah, I mean, the only difficulty, obviously, the GAA are quite progressive within the structures that they have, organisation anyway. Like, they're constantly tweaking structures and rules and all that stuff. Like, it's not as if they sit in their hands for decades on end, you know.
Yeah, like, you could make the argument, though, that there could have been a bit more progressiveness as well. Like, I mean, there has been changes made, and I think that kind of indicates where the organisation is at, that it's been so close to... A lot of the structures have been so close to breaking point for so long that change had to happen, essentially. But like, I wonder sometimes if the best fix, not even the best fix, but just I wonder is the best thing to do right now, if they do come to a situation where they're calling off the year, use that time to just say to yourself, in an ideal world, how would the 2021 GAA calendar look, or even 2022, in a situation where coronavirus does not exist and say normalcy does return, what would be your ideal calendar? I think all the big players in the GAA should be proposing what their ideal calendar looks like. Yeah. And then I think to reach that point, ripping up the current script is probably the way to do that.
Yeah, interesting times, I think, for everybody from a sport and business point of view, that everybody has to get a little bit more creative than they might have considered previously, or that they might have liked. Even that League of Ireland idea, I love it, like that idea of sort of the best 4 teams in the league playing off at some point or another. It doesn't have to be necessarily related to the idea of closing the season. That actually, this just sounds like a bloody fantastic week of football if they could get it on at some point. The Irish Examiner this morning as leading the way here, a picture of 2 seamstresses at Into Sport, clothing company Kilkenny, who've moved from making GAA gear into medical scrubs. That leads the way there. Owen Cormacan with the story of the Cork chair Tracy Kennedy backing the GAA's call to keep grounds shut until July of this year. Technically, obviously permitted to reopen under the government's phase plan in 10 days' time, but several GAA voices asking for the grounds to open, obviously. But then Tracy Kennedy here is not one of them. I can't see any reason, she says, why we do anything other than prioritise public safety. And I certainly wouldn't want to be responsible for putting anybody's health and safety at risk. It's a real point of contention in GAA at the minute as to whether those clubs should be open or not. But the Cork chair clearly falling down on one side of that. John Fogarty writes about the clubs having to shell out their insurance premiums regardless of whether they're going to be open or closed. Central Council has paid apparently the $6 million that was due, and the 6-month window for repaying that from clubs to the GAA is now up. So apparently they're looking for that money, and it seems there will be some sort of a checks and balances here with a bit of a saving in the Player Injury Benefit Fund, which is a knock-on of obviously not having any action, and that may help to slightly balance the books, but nevertheless those premiums have to be paid. And one last one from the Irish Examiner. Stephen Barry has a reflection there on the career, as you can see, of the awfully great Paddy Malloy, who passed away this week. He tells us how Paddy started as a goalkeeper and played in every single line of the team over a pretty stellar 16-year career.
The Irish Times this morning leads with a piece with former GAA President Liam O'Neill. He's been speaking to Sean Moran. Also, again, kind of on the same theme that Paddy Tally was speaking about what the opportunity is. The headline here is that O'Neill hopes shutdown can be used to implement change. So he says, imagine we were starting the GAA from scratch in 2021 and what it might look like. That is a suggestion that he is making for people who might have a bit of time to reconsider how the GAA looks. Only 2 years ago, a committee established by O'Neill's successor as president, Eoin O'Friel, to identify challenges ahead as the association moves towards its 150th anniversary, delivered a radical report that was promptly buried and not even released for discussion, writes Sean Moran, which is a good point. And then Liam O'Neill makes this very valid point, and I think it kind of comes back to your idea there that the GAA have chopped and changed a bit. O'Neill says, we've changed more radically in the 50 years since the McNamee Commission than we had done in the previous 87. And now it's nearly 20 years since the SRC, which is obviously the report that was brought into play, the Strategic Review Committee report that in 2002, which obviously changed the game entirely for the likes of Dublin. What are we now? It'll be 19 years this year since the first year of the qualifiers. If you look at the Football Championship in isolation, since then there's been the introduction of the Super 8s. Outside of that, what has been the real radical change for an organisation that's actually darting towards professionalism and certainly darting towards a situation where more intercounty games is what people want to see on the wider scale. And I don't mean that on a kind of lower down. Obviously, the club player is getting screwed over in so many ways, but like the training to games ratio has obviously been one of the biggest issues of being an intercounty footballer, and having only taken one step since the introduction of the qualifiers, it seems like an organisation that hasn't changed all that much, but perhaps now is the opportunity to arrest that a small bit. The other GAA piece I should mention here that's kind of across the back pages this morning is Michael Murphy. He still sees hope and reason for football in 2020. He's all for bringing back the championship this year or playing behind closed doors. He doesn't say behind closed doors, but he does say you're looking over at Germany at the moment. Sport is getting back up and running, and that might just be a very easy comparison to make. But that's what I'm hopefully looking for. Football this year, and again, it's everyone's personal view, but I'm still hopeful of football this year. And he says, I just want football back. If it's done through Ulster, well and good. If it's done through a 32-county open draw, bring it on too. So just wants to get back out and playing, Michael Murphy. And as I say, doesn't stay behind closed doors, but you'd imagine if he's making the Germany comparison, he'd be okay with that as long as he's playing. So that, like the GAA earlier this week said that there isn't an appetite in the wider association for behind closed doors championship. There's one of your biggest, most famous footballers saying that he would look at the Germany model and actually be happy to go along with it.
Yeah, speaking of Germany, it's you can see from the Times London edition this morning, the UK Times, that racing is back there. You can see that photograph up on the top left of your screen there. Empty grounds and jockeys in face masks is exactly the approach there. I do wonder if Irish or UK jockeys are going to make the trip over, if there's work to be had. Is it legit for them to get over there? Would they be interested in that sort of thing? We shall see, and obviously France set to follow suit as well. Unrest in the Premier League, meanwhile, with some clubs not happy with the suggested ending to the season, and those obviously in relegation danger particularly displeased about it. More on that on some of the other papers as well. And Alex Lowe writes about, they've always over the last few weeks The UK Times managed to drum up some sort of a rugby story that doesn't exist elsewhere. And this one's from Alex Lowe, writing about Japan still very much interested in hosting the Lions next year as part of that South African tour. Warren Gatland had been suggesting that a New Zealand showdown, I don't know why he'd be suggesting this thing, but a New Zealand showdown as an extra game would be a great thing to do. I mean, it's hard to argue against it, but to be fair, I think Japan have been given indications that they're set to host one of these things, and they are still putting their hand up very much to say, listen, we're here, lads. Come on over.
The Irish Daily Mail this morning leads with Michael Murphy as well. Hope is all we have. Donegal ace Murphy is keeping faith that GAA fans will see a 2020 championship. And Philip Quinn writing today that we'd have won the World Cup with Lineker. That's a quote from Jack Charlton. Today is his 85th birthday, and Philip Quinn has been speaking to Tony Cascarino, saying around Italia 90, Jack was always looking for a pacey centre forward like England had with Lineker. Aldo was our quickest, but he wasn't as fast as Lineker, who could beat defenders to the ball over the top. So that's what Jack Charlton told him after they lost the quarter-final. So imagine being Tony Cascarino or John Aldridge at that point and being told that, you know, if it wasn't you but Gary Lineker instead, we might have gone all the way.
A real man manager, wasn't he? That's taking care of the player's ego. It's sort of reassuring to hear that Big Jack had that going on, as we have assumed from the various players that he's culled over the year, that certainly existed in the background. In the Daily Mirror this morning, in the Irish version of it, I think it's the UK version you can see there, but in the Irish version, Paul O'Hare has a story about the League of Ireland not getting back until September. That Michael Murphy story, can't wait to get back to football as well. John Cross has a story about the Brighton CEO, that's the one you can see in front of you there, Restart Revolt, saying that neutral venues aren't a runner. 6 clubs, we're told, have been vocal against them, but the Brighton CEO saying that many more than just those 6 aren't happy about the entire thing, and this is something that we expect to run, and exactly how much it stalls Premier League plans, we shall see, but that's set to run. And a bizarre photo you can see there on the bottom right from a Chinese baseball game where they've placed cardboard cutouts around the ground to make it look full. I mean, I don't know if this is something that we're going to see at Austin Stack Park, Owen, or at Parnell Park or Crow Park. It's slightly bizarre.
It's haunting. It's like the premise for a horror movie. Like you could almost picture like a serial killer that comes to life in the middle of a crowd of cardboard cutouts.
Like you totally get the rationale for it. Like the last thing you want to be looking at is an empty ground. Like Thomond Park, Thomond Park was redesigned. They obviously put those different coloured seats in for those games where they knew there wasn't going to be a full attendance, and it makes it look slightly as if there are actually people there. I
don't get the rationale for it. No, there is no rationale.
Well, the rationale is that you don't want to be looking at an empty ground, and actually, like,
I think players are smart enough to realise that they aren't real human beings.
It's nothing to do with the players, obviously. It's the TV audience, and also, by the way, like, if it needs saying, like, I don't think they're going to be taking any close-up shots of the crowd anytime soon, like in celebration after the home run. I think it's just for those fleeting shots to give some sort of an impression of, like, oh, look at this great atmosphere. I don't know. Are they pumping in? I know you lads were chatting about it during the week. Are they pumping in, like, cheers and jeers?
Hopefully. It would only be a real football crowd as well if they had a few cardboard cutouts of middle-aged men doing lewd hand gestures towards the people.
Yeah. Newcastle fans without their shirts on, that sort of thing.
That's exactly it. I'd be all for that. I could see the rationale for that, but I think it would be like, imagine the silence and just seeing 50,000 faces around you. Like,
I don't know. Has anybody really done a great study on how this should work or shouldn't work? But that baseball example was like 3 or 4. Like, it was like a front row of fans. Listen, I mean, I feel I'm now in the. I feel as if it's now on me to make the case as to why there should be cardboard cutouts in sports stadiums around the world, and I feel slightly uncomfortable with that pressure. I'm not against it. I would be all for looking at, I haven't seen the actual footage of this game. I'd love to have a look and see because it's just for fleeting TV shots.
It's obviously just for fleeting TV shots. Like, you could have a bit of fun with it as well. You could put people sitting beside each other that clearly don't get on. Like, in terms of the celebrity section that the camera often pans to. Like, it was a cool idea. Like, it was a German club that had started putting faces of their fans into the ground, wasn't it? Because they were missing out on football and stuff. Like, it's a nice idea. I get it, but
you could do you could get that guy, that awfully knobhead. Is he Kerry Knobhead, the guy who always goes to the majors in his jersey? You could like put a full life-size version of him around the fairways.
There are multiple Kerry gentlemen who do that, not just one person, and he's not a knobhead.
Gentlemen.
Very nice people.
Many knobheads is what you're saying.
Back page of the Irish Daily Star this morning, while I dropped my newspaper, is people will starve. It's Davy Russell hitting out fairly hard at the decision to push return to June 29th, basically, when it comes to racing. Just to go through some of his quotes. People are going to be in an awful hole. Some jockeys and trainers are really struggling. It's crazy, absolutely crazy. We have to stay fit and keep going. Horses have routines. They still have to be written out. He says footballers or rugby players can train at home by themselves. Racehorses obviously can't do that. It's soul destroying. People are going to starve. People are going to go out of business. I know it's very, very tough for every business. I don't want to sound like racing is special, but a closed coffee shop is not spending money except maybe on rent. Horses still have to be fed and maintained. Staff and vets have to be paid, but there's no money coming in. It's interesting, as you say, Adrian, like, if there is jockeys without work, is there going to be opportunities for them in a country like Germany who has racing going ahead? There's obviously a very finite amount, so I'd have my doubts around that. But June 29th, as Davy Russell mentioning there, when the return to racing is currently stated for. An interesting one here by Paul Lennon. Hickey's book on the way. Pat Hickey due to release a book at some point over the next 12 months before the 2021 Tokyo Olympics. Unclear whether or not he has secured a publisher or not yet. Sanchez clash, meanwhile. Manchester United are on a fresh collision course with outcast Alexis Sanchez. So he spent the year on loan, obviously, at Inter Milan, and the terms of the deal obviously end on June 30th. Top level football obviously suspended. Does that mean he actually has to stay beyond that? Does he get to the end of the season if the season is resumed? That is currently the predicament that Manchester United and Alexis Sanchez face. And then Rebel Alliance, we've got the numbers up here at the top left. Brighton Chief Executive Paul Barber has warned the Premier League is facing a full-scale revolt over the project restart plans. It might not be a full-scale revolt, but it's certainly 6 teams who are hugely unhappy with the prospect of relegation happening.
Pat Hickey book. I mean, I don't know if it's the absence of sport that has me all excited about it, but I'm definitely reading that.
Yeah, I would definitely be curious to see what's contained within the covers of the book. That's for sure.
His backside, I'm assuming, features it largely.
It depends who the ghostwriter is, obviously.
Yeah. Dara Toole's been in touch about the cardboard cutouts on. It's got people exercised this morning. He says either that or the world's greatest cardboard salesman has had a profitable outcome.
Possibly, like, they're not very weather resistant pieces of cardboard.
Yeah, it's a good point.
Like,
not well laminated.
Yeah, well laminated or plastic, good quality plastic. Like, that's probably the only way we can do it.
It's a conversation worth having. The Irish Sun feed this morning, Neil O'Riordan, on the fact that some League of Ireland clubs are going to miss out on European money. Dundalk, Bows, Rovers, Derry, this is on the Irish version. All due to play at various stages, obviously, but who knows if those games are even going to take place now. So significant doubt about that and the impact that loss of revenue would have on those clubs, I'm sure, as well. And so many different offshoots of these delays. Obviously, the latest one is that some clubs are concerned in the Premier League that Liverpool are so far ahead that if the season returns at some point to be run off, that because of the condensed nature of running quickly into a new season, that Liverpool would perhaps rest all of their best players. So clubs have already played them twice, clearly aren't happy with that.
The Herald this morning, they've been, they don't have something on the back page, but on the inside we've got Eamon Carr finishing his list of the top 10 sporting moments that have happened in Dublin. Do you want to take a guess at what's top the list?
Of the top 10 sporting moments that have taken place in Dublin?
Yeah, so the list so far, number 10 was Ali at Croker, number 9 was the International Rules in 98, Aga Khan hat-trick in 79, McCullough versus Bueno in 96, Ireland versus Brazil in 87, Ireland's 85 Triple Crown, Ireland against Italy in 1985, Dunn versus Cordoba in 2009, and Santry Golden Mile in 1958. Number 1.
Tour de France up there?
It's not at the top 10, it's a rugby occasion.
The All Blacks win?
No, Ireland against England, 07, Croke Park.
Fair enough.
The headline, Tribal Exorcism at Croke Park as Irish thrive on the emotions. So that's the main story inside the Herald.
You know that putting a rugby moment at the top of that list, those who like to get outraged are going to be pretty outraged by it.
And it's in a GAA stadium that also has hosted football, so...
All the more reason to be outraged on is how I would see that. In the Guardian this morning, Saracens players, the latest boneheads to decide that they needed to meet up for a coffee, that they would flout lockdown advice and just gather for a bit of a chat. And the other stories mentioned there, Premier League players to get their voice as part of the Premier League's Project Restart. Premier League shareholders are going to meet on Monday. Writes Paul McKinney's here, after which players are going to have the chance to speak about their own concerns and I presume ideas as well. That's in relation to the Premier League return.
Finally for me then, the Daily Telegraph leads with a story about World Rugby. More men called Brett than women. World Rugby Committee attacked as old boys club. Beaumont won re-election while backing female game. It's a great story here. Two Bretts on the committee, Brett Gosper and Brett Robinson. So Brett Gosper, the chief executive, Brett Robinson of Rugby Australia. So there's two Bretts, one woman on the World Rugby Committee, and a few dissenting voices about that carried as the main story at the back of the Daily Telegraph. Project Restart route takes a toxic turn. Meanwhile, as I alluded to, the bottom six refusing to back down over neutral venues. Rebel clubs threatened with points deduction. So a couple of clubs coming out quite vocally. You need 14 votes in favour of a ballot playing games at neutral venues to close out the season. Paul Barber, as I've said, Brighton chief executive, not happy with that. He said an unfair relegation in the midst of a global pandemic would be catastrophic for his club, and that he could not endorse something that put at stake food on the table for families. But there's been a couple of voices clarifying that or hitting back at that. You've got Deputy Chief Constable Mark Robinson of the South Yorkshire Police on the record here as well. He says comments such as, we might get relegated, we don't want to play at neutral venues. When we played them away, there were fans in the stadium. We play at home without fans, that's a disadvantage. We want to get the trophy. I get that in a football context. These are all a big deal. But I think people making these comments really need to get a grip, given everything that's happened. And then also clubs are being told that the consequences of getting relegated, of not completing the season, rather, will be far worse than the losses of dropping into the Championship, because relegated teams get parachute payments. So a couple of points there to refute Paul Barber, the Brighton CEO, who's been quite vocal on this.
Yeah, and last of all to the Irish news here, and Rory Gallagher, the Derry manager, saying that most counties have written off 2020, not necessarily a reflection of his views. He's just saying that that's what his sense of, having spoken to a bunch of people, that a lot of inter-county teams and managers have decided already that 2020 isn't part of their plan. So we shall see how that plays out. That's the Irish news feed this morning, and that wraps up the newspapers for you at 8:38 on this Friday morning. We've lots still to come. You're watching OTB AM, the Sports Breakfast Show from Off the Balls, with you every weekday morning from 7:30. You can get in touch with us on all the usual social channels if you want to drop us a comment, which many of you have been this morning. Do keep those coming in, or if you want to drop us a text on WhatsApp, 0879 180 180. And you can check out as well, by the way, the full OTB podcast network. If you head along to offtheball.com, you can check out all of our latest podcasts from all the shows, and they'll all live for you there. Right, we are turning our attention to rugby. The 34 times Ireland capped, 14 seasons with Leinster. Fergus McFadden has called time in a brilliant career this week, and delighted to say he's going to join us next on OTB AM for a chat. First though, one of Fergus's former teammates got in touch with us when he heard that he'd be joining us this morning. Take a look.